Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and I'm here today to learn with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. In this case, I think mostly furry is what we're going for here. We're talking about the otter, and as we'll see a little bit later into the podcast show, how furry these guys really are, because they truly are. Amazing creatures. I'm just going to talk about first what kind of has been going on. So right off the bat, I want to just say that I hope all of you are staying safe out there, washing your hands, doing whatever you got to do, and I hope that this show can provide you with a little bit of needed relaxation in these times of uncertainty. Right. So I am a student, as I may have mentioned on the podcast before, and I had trouble paying for the podcast hosting. So I'm actually going to be setting up a Patreon page where I'm going to be posting new content every week. So if you want to have 2 episodes per week, you can go to the Patreon, but it is not up just yet. So if you would like 2 episodes a week, I'm just waiting on some extra audio equipment to really deliver the best content I can possible. So I'm going to be giving some updates to that a little bit in the future, maybe in a week or so. But anyways, back into the show. So we're talking about otters today, and this episode is dedicated to a special listener out there, Jordan from the United Kingdom, who wrote me I think a few weeks ago, who suggested otter. So thank you very much for your suggestion. And if any of you out there have suggestions for any animals that you would like to see on the podcast, make sure to send me an email at relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and you can have a chance to be featured on the podcast along with an animal that you'd really like to hear about. So before we get into the show, I'm gonna just say where I got my facts from. So Discover Wildlife, the staple of the show, it always has been. National Geographic, and we also have JojoMomandBB.co.uk. That's a little bit of a mouthful there, but I think I did okay. Yeah, that is a really tough website URL. But anyways, why don't we just get straight into the show? So first, we have 13 different species of otters that exist all around the world. This I did not know. I only kind of knew about the sea otter. I didn't know how many there were, but there are indeed 13 as of right now. So some are small river otters, and some are bigger sea otters that a lot of us are kind of. I think the general picture we have of them are those kind of larger sea otters. So as we can see, there's a lot of different species, and they range in terms of size, they range in terms of weight, as well as different kind of mannerisms, I suppose. So they can vary from 2 feet to 6 feet long. They can weigh from 10 to 75 pounds, and they are indeed mammals, in case you didn't know. So 90% of all sea otters live on the coast of Alaska. So if you want to see otters, maybe right now traveling is not the best thing to do, but I suppose in the future when international travel or travel in general is a little bit more safe, if you want to see sea otters, you have a good chance if you go to the coast of Alaska. So as we said before, they're 10 to 75 pounds, and they are really hungry animals. They eat up to 25% of their body weight in food every day, which is a good amount, 25%. We've covered a lot of animals on the podcast already that eat even more than this, but 25% is still a good amount of weight. And if we're talking about their diet, they like to eat sea urchins, clams, mussels, crabs. They use their sea whiskers. They have little sea whiskers, almost like cat whiskers, and they use those whiskers to find creatures to eat, and their paws they can use to dig for clams and stuff like that. A sea otter can consume up to 11 kilograms of food per day to support its high metabolism. So as we said before, that is about a quarter of its own body weight. Of course, this is depending on the specific size, but this is on average. And the energy demands of a sea otter mother increases by about 17% after giving birth. So giving birth, ranging in the majority of species in the animal kingdom, of course, this doesn't cover all of them, I'm sure, but even for, like, if we're talking about humans, for example, I think most of us know the taxing nature of giving birth, physically, mentally, things like that, which I hear is always worth it in the end. But of course, this is a taxing experience, and it's the same thing for otters, where they need to up their energy sources to make sure that they can survive kind of optimally, because this is a very taxing experience. They need to consume more. So we're going to move on to their teeth now. So they're going to need to have strong teeth because of their diet. As we said, they eat sea urchins. Those of you who maybe don't like seafood too much or just aren't aware of what sea urchins are, they are a very thick-shelled animal with spikes all around, almost alien looking. Very interesting, but of course they're going to need some good teeth to tackle that. So a recent study has revealed that sea otter tooth enamel, and enamel is that kind of covering, any dentists out there. It's just like us humans, we have enamel around our teeth that protects it from various things. It's much tougher in otters, the tooth enamel, than that of humans. And this will help them to prevent their teeth from being chipped and cracked when they bite into the hard shells of some of their prey. So they have a very high bite force, and of course, if they don't have tooth enamel to boot, this could result in some kind of damage to the tooth, which in the animal kingdom is a very big deal because they can't go to their dentists and get they can't get that fixed up. So that can really prevent them, that can hinder their survival a lot. And in this animal's enamel, it contains additional layers of a protein-rich gel that works to prevent cracks from spreading in the first place. So very, very interesting physiological or physical kind of properties that the otter has. And I think this, it's a theme in the animal kingdom for sure, especially from the other animals that we've covered, that these adaptations, how nature works, is such a beautiful thing, that it allows these animals to exist and have these different kinds of adaptations depending on what they eat and stuff like that. It's amazing. So I'm just going to take a quick drink of my tea here. I know I have gotten emails before that some of you like it, some of you don't like it, but I am a human being, okay, so I need to drink. And here I have a chamomile tea. So it's around 2 p.m. right now for me, and I'm drinking a chamomile tea. I guess that's what I'm doing. So I hope that is not too loud. So let's talk about tools for a second. So we have covered animals before on the podcast that do use tools. I am a big fan of primates, as most of you know, which is, and the use of tools in many primates is one of the reasons. Tools show a level of intelligence that is very interesting to kind of study. The ability to use things in your environment to your advantage is something that, purposefully, is something that it does require a bit of higher intelligence. And in terms of otters, not all of them use tools, but sea otters in particular use them all the time. So we see this theme pretty often with rocks. They really love rocks, and they will typically use empty shells or rocks to feed on marine snails, crabs, sea urchins, and mussels. So there are only a handful of non-primate species that are known to use tools to begin with, which include dolphins and octopuses, as we know, very, very smart, intelligent species. But it's a fairly rare trait among non-primate species, so hats off to the otter. So they will use rocks to crack open the clams, and they will also carry rocks and store food in the loose skin under their armpits. So they have these little areas where they like to store things. So they have their little carrier bags, I suppose. They don't need to use plastic bags to carry anything around, or even biodegradable bags. They have these little, I guess, folds of skin underneath their armpits they can use to carry things around. So these cute guys don't need bags. And I don't know if any of you have seen this before. I had never heard of this before, but they juggle rocks. I spent a good chunk of my day looking at otters juggling rocks, and it's a very mesmerizing thing to watch. If you haven't watched it before, whenever you have a chance, just search up on YouTube or on Google otters juggling rocks, and it's super, super funny and interesting to watch. And the reason that they do this is not entirely understood. One of the main theories is that it's just for fun. So that is one that I would like to believe. I just like to believe that these guys like to have a good time and, in their downtime juggle some rocks. Why not? However, there are other theories believing it may signal hunger, just because they use rocks as one of their tools to open clams and mollusks. So this is interesting. This is an interesting theory. I don't know how well it holds up, just because I'm not sure if they would do this as a ritual to kind of, before they eat, signal to other otters that they're hungry necessarily. Maybe for me, this would be a more compelling argument if it was more seen in baby otters, so they can signal hunger to the mother. But these are adult otters just laying on their backs in the outside the water and having a great time. So I am more a believer of that this is purely for fun, but of course everyone out there can form their own opinions about it. And these are the great things with multiple theory kind of things. And there's still so many things to be discovered in the animal kingdom. So I'm always watching out for stuff like that. And I saw a funny comment on a YouTube video that said that they invented rock and roll. I just thought that was great. Puns are puns can be a little bit lame, but sometimes they're funny. The next fact is that unlike most marine animals, they don't have a layer of blubber. So we've talked about some animals on the podcast already, including polar bears, or let's say beluga whales, that do have blubber to help with insulation and just heat in general. But they have the thickest fur of any mammal on Earth. So that is why I said at the beginning, this is a very furry friend. They have some of the thickest fur on the planet. And in terms of mammals, they're actually top dog. They're number one as of right now. So the top layer is made up of a waterproof layer. And then they have a short underlayer, which can contain as many as 1 million hairs per square inch. So that is hard to relate to humans because I'm not exactly sure how many hairs we have per square inch, but I do not think it is 1 million hairs. I very much don't think so. I think we might even have half of that or even a lot less than that. It's hard to relate because I'm not exactly sure. But baby otters, I always like to talk about the babies, what they're called and stuff. So they're called pups, which is really awesome. I like that. Pups are kind of like, puppies, like dogs, and they do look like kind of little river dogs to me. And newborn pups will need a lot of attention, just like the majority of animals in the animal kingdom. They will stay close to their mom until they've developed enough skills to be able to do it alone. So also very common theme there. And it is usually about 6 months that it takes for them to be independent enough to hunt and stuff on their own. And if you're wondering how sea otters give birth, they do it in the water. So they don't go out on land, they stay in the water and give birth there. So most females will only have about one pup at a time, because I guess otters can be an absolute handful. It's probably hard to watch to make sure they're not all juggling rocks at once, but I have no idea. So they like to have one pup at a time, typically. The mother will produce milk, hunt, and teach the pup how to dive for food on their own until about that 5 to 8 month mark, I suppose 6 months on average, how to kind of fend for itself in its habitat. So the reason that the obligation of hunting is mostly falls on the mother and not the pup is because the pup's fur is too dense for it to actually swim underwater. So the mother will leave them floating on the surface while searching for food until the adult fur grows in and allows them to, I suppose, dive on their own. So that is pretty interesting. We have talked so many times on this podcast about animals holding their breath underwater. So you can take a guess as to how long you think otters can hold their breath. But generally, you probably would not want to challenge these guys to a competition. So they can stay underwater for about 5 minutes, and river otters can hold their breath for even longer. We're talking about 8 minutes long. So I think that it's definitely not in terms of the podcast, we have covered some animals that can hold their breath, I think, up to 20 minutes. So they're not top dog in that sense, but still 5 to 8 minutes underwater is still an impressive feat nonetheless. So otters generally like to stick together, which is a very common thing in the animal kingdom, because sticking together generally, it could be for warmth, it could be for protection against predators, because being in a herd is, in this case, it's not considered a herd with otters. We'll name that in a second. But being together can provide so many advantages in the wild. So what will happen, they like to stick together, so when they sleep, they will wrap themselves in seaweed, and they will float together in a group, which just sounds like one of the most relaxing things ever. And a group of resting otters, kind of on the water, is called the raft, which I think is just so awesome. So there's a raft of otters, which is just a bunch of them resting on top of the water. And you wouldn't want to exactly go on one of these rafts, maybe, because they, as we've talked about, they have very strong teeth and a strong bite. So maybe don't try to go on a raft. Maybe just stick to kayak or something like that. Out of the water, though, a group is typically called a romp. There are some other words for it, but generally the most common word for it is romp. So if you see a group of otters out of the water, maybe you're in Alaska. If you see them out of the water, a few of them, you can say, hey, there's a romp of otters. So let's talk about, are they endangered? So this is something that I like to talk about on the podcast, just to build a little bit of awareness. So it really varies by species and location, but generally they have been going down historically, I guess, over the past few years. But on a bright note, Eurasian otters, for example, they have had an amazing comeback in the United Kingdom. So Jordan out there, who recommended otters, in the United Kingdom, they've had a good comeback. So that's awesome. North American sea otters were close to extinction in the 19th century, but there was a treaty passed in 1911, which is the International Fur Seal Treaty, which are doing quite well. The otters are doing quite well because of that. Which is great, because as we know, the majority of animals play a very key role in maintaining the ecosystem in some way. And in the case of otters, for example, sea otters, they play a key role in maintaining kelp beds by eating sea urchins and different kind of things like that. Mostly sea urchins, which can grow in population very, very quickly if not managed. So it is really important to have this particular species around. So this fur treaty passed in 1911 was really, really an important part of maintaining this species' existence, because as we talked about, they're very furry, and having 1 million hairs per square inch, I believe the number was, is something that can keep people warm, really warm. So that is particularly why they were hunted and hunted for their fur. So I'm glad that in 1911, they decided to kind of maintain the otter species by implementing this treaty. Now we're going to talk about some specific, cases of otters. So this one has to do with otters and adoption. I thought it was really cool. So in 2001, a female otter at the Monterey Bay Aquarium gave birth to a stillborn pup on the same day. A stranded pup was discovered in the wild nearby. So the aquarium staff had previously tried raising the pups themselves, but found that hand-raised otters became too attached to humans to be released back into the wild, which is something that researchers and other maybe people working at sanctuaries understand, that they don't want them to become too attached and too dependent on humans, because then release into the wild becomes impossible. So it's great that, of course, they're aware. So what they did, they put the pup in with the female otter who had the stillborn pup, unfortunately, and then she went immediately into mom mode, as they called it. So the aquarium has since devised a system of hand-rearing pups for the first 6 to 8 weeks of their life, mostly for bottle feeding purposes, and then they would hand the pups off to the female otters to be raised properly. And then at 6 months, the pups are released back into the wild with generally strong results. Of course, maybe there may be a few exceptions, but generally good. So that is amazing that they almost have this adoptive kind of mom capability there, which is not very common, at least to the animals that I know. Because as you guys know, I am learning here right with you. I'm not an animal biologist, I'm not a zoologist. I'm just a normal guy here reading these facts with you and learning. For example, primates specifically, let's say gorillas, right? Or many other primates, they really, really don't want offspring that is not their own, and become incredibly hostile to any offspring that is not their own. Going as far even to eliminate some offspring if they come into, if they become the alpha male of the group, they really want their own bloodline to be carried on. But it seems as if otters have this kind of keen sense of motherhood that I guess they don't care if they are genetically related or not. They just like to raise, I suppose, which is awesome. In 2014, a study of giant otters found that the river dwellers have 22 distinct noises that they make for different situations. And on top of that, pups have 11 of their own calls that they intersperse with infant babbling. So just like humans, how they have their little babbling going on. Among the most notable calls, a hum gradation, as they call it, is used to tell nearby otters to change direction. And they have a kind of aha shout when a threat is nearby. So I think that's fantastic. I always love to see how animals maybe vocalize or have their sense of communication. So in case you didn't know, I definitely didn't know that they do have some distinct noises. And the last thing here, the last fact for today, is that they love to play. So as we talked about before, they will often build themselves slides along the river, along the banks of rivers. So they will make their own water slides and have just a great old time. So honestly, if I was to be an animal, maybe otter is on my top list. They juggle, they go down slides. So I mean, how can it get any better? So for the final fact, as most of you know who are longtime listeners, we talk about the origin of otters specifically. Now I couldn't find a story here. It was the only things that were coming up was on Wikipedia, and I don't want to mislead anybody. So I decided to just look up the word otter. Where does it come from? And it comes from the Greek word hudros, which describes a water snake. So I think that's very fitting to the animal, to otters, water snake. They do kind of look like that, but it doesn't exactly paint the best picture, because I wouldn't imagine snakes like to go down slides or juggle. So again, thank you so very much to Jordan from the UK for your suggestion. If you want to see your animal possibly featured on the podcast, make sure to send me an email at relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and you can have a chance to be on the podcast and get shouted out. If I made any mistakes in the podcast, I will do a section of the podcast where I get corrected by you guys. So again, if you have an animal suggestion, or maybe I said something incorrectly and maybe someone out there knows a better way of articulating what I was trying to say, or maybe I was just plain out wrong, which happens, make sure to send me an email so I can correct it on the next episode, and you'll get shouted out as well. So thank you all so very much for listening, and I will see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.